Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Wellness Day, a podcast coming to you every Wednesday here from the Jahangir Wellness Center. My name is Kavas Jahangir, and here from the JWC studio today, I've got a guest that's talking about wellness, as we always do, but we're approaching it slightly differently today. Today, I've got someone who is perhaps seen wellness from the lens of complete sickness. I've got Dr. Kayanush Kadapati here today, who is the ICU head at Jahangir Hospital. Thank you so much for being here, Doc. It's a pleasure to finally have you on board. I've been trying to get you here for a while, but I've finally got you here now. Um, I'll just start by saying exactly that, we've had guests over here that we've been talking about in various aspects of wellness and how to stay well and preventive and so forth. I thought it'd be interesting to get a view from perhaps the most intensive, no pun intended, part of the hospital where, sickness is perhaps at its most end of its spectrum. And to understand your perspective on wellness from that standpoint and that experience that you've got. So I'll just simply ask, what does wellness mean to you in that context?
So basically, the patients we deal with are the most critically ill, and some of them we can treat and they get well, and some of them die. So we
Yeah.
see death at very close quarters, and therefore, wellness for me is a very important asset. Health is a very important invisible asset, and I think that everybody should invest in their health. So basically, being well and staying well is the most important thing. We should be preemptive rather than reactive.
Right.
And basically, health lies in our own hands. And if we regularly follow up and do like be visit doctors just
Right.
to stay healthy, then I don't think you would basically come to the end road of
Or being in the
diseases and
ICU.
basically catch it early. Basically, everything has a timeline, and if you catch any kind of an abnormality early, and if you can treat it well, then maybe you would not basically uh, come
Get
to
to
the
that point.
get to that point, and also basically some people will come to the ICU. Yes, we can't guarantee that if you do this, you will not
Right.
come. But then, basically, it would basically reduce the burden on critical
Or the
care.
odds
Or
of
the
the
odds
odds.
also. Yeah,
But
probability.
I mean, it's like you said, the preventive side. So, what are the most common things that come to your mind if you're in the ICU and you see a patient where you be like, oh God, this could have been so avoidable if they did
Yeah.
X, Y, Z. So, what are the ones that come to your mind
So
on the top of your
basically,
head?
the most common things are basically ignorance of chest pain.
I
Like,
see.
we
Okay.
have patients sometimes who have chest pain from 3 and 4 days. Basically, this recently, yesterday, we had a code blue where there was a patient who had chest pain for 8 days and then came to the hospital OPD where she basically had an unresponsive state and then
Oh, at
basically
the
coded
when she just came to visit.
just to the visit because the chest pain was 8 days old. There was an anterior wall MI. And so basically misinterpreting chest pain and saying that it is only acidity, and ignoring it. That's the first thing. Second thing is, I feel when we have young children with traumatic children means young boys and girls who come with traumatic brain injury or an accident
Right.
and they have not worn a helmet, then then you
Oh,
would
right. Yeah,
feel that
that's a
maybe you could have just prevented it if you it wouldn't have been so bad if you had not worn a helmet. Controlling diabetes. Basically, diabetes is an invisible disease. Like, you don't see it regularly. Your sugars are 300, 400, and you say it's okay. It doesn't matter. But regularly visiting doctors and, checking your sugars, keeping your HbA1c less than 7.5.
Right.
Basically, that will also help prevent end organ damage and then, disable bad organs.
Okay.
coming
I was
to the
actually just going to
ICU
ask you from the
with
diabetes
infection.
standpoint, what
Yeah.
is the kind of thing that actually comes to you, or rather, what are the kind of things that come to
So
you
we
when
get
you get to
diabetic
that?
emergencies. That is, we get diabetic ketoacidosis. We have hyperglycemic hyperosmolar syndromes where the sugars are more than 600, 800, and they come to comatose condition, possibly some infection in the kidney
Right.
because of an uncontrolled. So what happens? The high sugars they basically increase infection, and infection worsens sugar. So it's a vicious cycle, and then you would get basically a infection which was just a simple urinary tract infections becomes complicated. It becomes a pyelonephritis is going up to the kidney, and then they come to you in septic shock and a decay, which is a common thing that we see there when the diabetes is uncontrolled. Hypertension, if you do not control your hypertension, then you can land up with intracerebral hemorrhage. We have just recently 2 young boys, one 26-year-old and a 30-year-old, who basically have uncontrolled hypertension, blood pressures of 260 by 110, and come with massive hemorrhage in the brain. And now basically one got operated, one basically became brain dead, and basically perished. So these are all silent diseases which need to be controlled. You have to make friends with these diseases. It cannot be cured.
That's a nice way to say it. Make friends
you
with
have to make friends. That's what I tell my patients. You make friends with a disease and learn to live with it. You can have a good life. You can enjoy yourself, and basically in a limited kind of a way. And if you really eat healthy and control your sugars, there's lots that you can do as a diabetic or a hypertensive.
Right,
So,
yeah.
it is not something that, oh, why did it have to happen to me? And, it's not fair. You have to basically live around that, take your medicines on time.
Right.
And I'm sure you can lead a healthy life with it also.
But you were talking about, like, for example, these young patients that, that had these unfortunate incidents. Are you seeing a trend of younger people with these diseases coming to you more and more?
We've seen patients at the age of 22 have an acute myocardial infarction, and it is like, the whole disease trajectory is now shifting from, middle-aged and maybe elderly to the younger
Why
population.
do you think that's happening?
I think it's basically because of lifestyle, because of, the way people are not the work hours, but I think it's the work culture,
The stress?
and maybe the stress also, because you're working in a corporate place where it's very, very high stress levels, which may promote atherogenesis. The quality of food that we eat is very important.
Absolutely,
Anyone
yeah.
is ordering on Swiggy and all these Zomato and all that stuff. So we don't know what oil they are cooking in, and basically if it is very bad saturated fat and you're eating all the fried foods all the time, just a sandwich or just vada pav or all this fast
stuff.
food. Yeah, it's all the yummy stuff which is convenient because you don't have to go home and cook, and then you're hungry and you're snacking all the time, and then you're sedentary. So there is you're sitting most of the time at your desk and doing work. So I feel that sitting is the new smoking.
Yeah,
So it
absolutely.
is the non-exercise activity time. We may feel that we exercise for about half an hour in the day, or we go to the gym 3 times a week.
Right.
But it is basically about mobility for the rest of the 23 hours of the day. So, you need to move and walk all the time so that, you complete that, 6,000 to 8,000 steps. It's not 10,000 anymore, but at least you should be able to target 7,000 steps in a day, which would basically help to improve your basal metabolic rate
Right.
and, reduce the atherogenesis in the vessels. Then also basically these weekend, with the lights, the late nights, the lack of
I was just going to say, the sleep must be
smoking,
is
the
becoming a huge
alcohol,
aspect.
Yeah, the smoking, the alcohol, the late nights, all this basically adds up. So, you abuse your body in the
Right.
early 20s and 30s, and then you land up with a lot of problems. So health is an invisible asset, and we have to invest in our bodies so that it gives you a good return in the long
And
run.
as you said, invest in it younger, because as you're starting to see that trend of
Yeah.
the younger disease, so we have to start addressing it younger as well.
Yeah, and now people are vaping. It is worse than smoking.
Yeah.
So, when you see that younger generation do all these things, then it is basically a little worrying. And then we see so much of hypertension and so much of heart disease in the young age
Right,
group.
right.
Yeah.
And
then
I'm
you see-
sure stress is playing such a
Yeah.
huge aspect of that as well.
Yeah, stress
and-
also, yeah.
I mean, you're a sort of stalwart angel / general in the ICU.
Thank you for those kind words.
That, we've seen so many people come through and come out on the other side of what
Yeah.
looked like, a deathbed for them, but you got them back on their feet, and there've been so many great stories of that, which I have to commend you on, because that,
Thank
I
you.
think it's incredible how you can bring someone from that state back to being well. So I just definitely wanted to point that out and thank you for everything that you do on that aspect.
To that effect, I would say it is teamwork.
Of course.
It is basically teamwork across the board. You know, you need to work in a very good team which understands your language and does the same thing at any hour of the day.
Yeah.
It does not. It does not only mean me. It is the team of ICU doctors who work day and night.
Yeah, and you all
do
have to
the
be on
same
it
thing.
24/7.
It is a team of nurses who understand the language that you're talking and you can do timely. So basically, in intensive care, it is all about timing. Everything is about timing, okay? If you are not going to resuscitate on time, you're going to maybe, you will not be able to maybe resuscitate the heart in event of a cardiorespiratory arrest. If you do not resuscitate adequately, then maybe you will resuscitate the heart, but your brain has gone for a toss and you land up in hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy. So it's all about timing and it's all about the same language that is spoken across the board because ultimately it is a team effort.
Yeah. And it's like, as I said, it's such a high stressful environment. What do you do for your own stress then?
No, basically, you have, you have been trained to deal with this stress. You know, it is the training and the years of experience that make you deal with the stress. Initially, when I was a youngster, and we used to get, agitated. We used to basically, feel, and you would feel that your heart rate rising when a patient was crashing, and the adrenaline surge, and dealing with it. But over a period of time, when you exactly know what has to be done, how is it to be done, and what is going to be the outcome, you have a controlled it's a controlled environment inside of your body, whereby yes, you would be a little worried, but then you know how to control the stress. So
Trust your training, trust your
yeah, you have to trust the upbringing.
the
basically,
fundamentals. Yeah.
That's the thing.
How did you get into this? Or what made you decide to get into the intensive side of what medicine is?
No, basically, I did not want to do a super specialty.
Right.
And I was a lecturer in Sassoon Hospital in the Department of Medicine. And that time, intensive care was not a well recognized specialty. But then, basically, we were, maybe it was a tact or, as a dedicated lecturer in the
You just chose
Department
to
of
be super
Medicine.
special.
We just, no, it was not that. Basically, we could just manage all the emergencies because Sassoon never had a specialty course. It was
Right.
only general medicine. And then we used to manage all the emergencies on the floor. And it was my boss who actually told me that you would be a good intensivist and that you should do critical care. And that's why basically I came across, after my postings finished in, the tenure finished in Sassoon, I came to Jahangir and then I trained in intensive care. As I worked, I also trained, and it was still the field was very much in its infancy. And then we trained and we studied and we worked and gave the exams and then qualified. And then it is basically been majority part of my medical day is spent in the ICU.
Right. Any stories that that stay with you that make you feel proud?
No, actually, basically, someone had told me to write about all these things, but then, there are things which you remember, but you don't remember. And I've never ever had the habit of keeping a diary, otherwise it would have been a big.
That's a good point. You should. I'm sure you've got
Yeah.
many stories
But,
and beautiful stories, as I said.
yeah, there are things which have touched our lives and people who but more of it, more than the successes is, it is basically some things which we may have wanted to do even better, but it did not happen. Or then when young people die, and this how it basically helps. But what we have done is basically, I think the COVID pandemic was something which I feel is a feather in our cap.
Absolutely,
Though
yeah.
people died, we could do so much of service to mankind. And it was the second pandemic that we actually treated. The swine flu pandemic was the first one, and the
Right.
COVID pandemic was the second one. And then, just like being the lead and how to take the whole workforce through it. was a challenge. It was a new disease. How to what was it unfolding? It was teaching us every day. It was teaching us something new, and some other system was being affected, right from the lungs to the to the clotting and the pulmonary embolisms
Right,
and the
right,
strokes and the heart attacks and the acute vascular necrosis we saw in the femurs, and then ultimately the fungal infections. So really challenge you at all points that a small virus, can just devastate the whole world. And it really taught you humility, where in this full world of science and microorganisms, is that a small little thing like that can create such havoc. And today, when you see all the fighting and the wars that we are doing, then that really says that no one ever learned from such a pandemic.
Yeah. No, I mean, the interesting you mentioned COVID, so I thought of one story I remember very clearly is that there was a patient that you were treating and was also extremely well known to the great Dr. Farooq Budwadia in Bombay. And I remember just one very short conversation over the phone that he had with one of us. And because that patient wanted to know, like, get a second opinion or whatever it is, he's like, is this person doing everything okay? And then I remember just the one line that he gave one of us was that he said that, I don't know why you're calling me. This lady knows exactly what she's doing. Referring to you.
Thank you for that comment. If it comes from such a doyen of intensive care, then I'm very grateful, and I'm very humbled by those words.
Well, I mean, as I said, you're an angel, you are a soldier, you are a general. I can keep going on with what you are. So then final question for everything that we've talked about. As I said, you've seen the full spectrum of wellness and sickness. What are the 3 non-negotiables that you tell people to do in their lifestyles to stay away from coming to you, hopefully?
So less is more.
Okay.
The first thing. So
What do you mean?
Less is more is basically, we use that term especially in intensive care, where when you want to institute therapies, think. But I would also extrapolate that concept to basically lifestyle, like minimalistic lifestyle, basically simplistic living. What do you need to live? You need to see that. So basically, if I think you have a regimen where you live simply, you eat simply, and you do your daily routine, I think that would keep you healthy and away from a lot of stress. So that is the first thing. I would say, see your doctor.
Yeah.
Which people don't
do.
want to do, and just to stay well, just to come and visit your doctor, check your
Check
blood
in
pressure.
every now and then.
You do your regular. Now we have such beautiful wellness
Right.
things, so you can do your wellness every year. And do your screen for basically disease, so that we can nip it in the bud, and take the due actions accordingly. And then don't be your own doctor. Listen to what advice the doctor gives you, because
Stay away from
basically,
Google.
yeah, and Google these things, and also what advice a doctor gives you.
Right.
I think that should be the thing. And then you should take your medicines on time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people feel that they are healthy when they don't take medicine, but maybe the BP is on the higher side,
Right,
the cholesterol is high. So, don't be afraid to take medicine and stay well.
Okay.
That is the thing.
I like the less is more, just as a philosophy.
Yeah.
Well, Doc, thank you so much for being here. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you and finally having you here and getting your deep experience, as I said, from the sickness side and how people can apply it to the wellness side. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Kavas, for having me. And it was quite a pleasure to talk to you.
Good. I'm so glad to have you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all. And before you leave and join us for next week's episode, please do not forget to hit the like and subscribe button here at the bottom. And if you have any comments, please do share them as well. Thank you.